like to make predictions about driverless vehicles. All of us in this room have heard all kinds of different predictions, many of them negative, about what our driverless future is going to look like. For example, here's one of my favorite wrong predictions, is that the car industry is doomed. We hear this a lot from experts. Here's another popular, but I would say erroneous prediction, that when driverless cars become commonplace, people and families will no longer buy their own vehicle at home because the thinking goes something like this: if you can just hail a ride in a driverless taxi and it's easy, why would anyone bother to invest in their own car? And finally, another very popular and worrisome prediction that I would say is also wrong is that driverless vehicles are going to kill jobs. None of these predictions are going to come true. For one, they're simply too pessimistic. And pure pessimism is never really accurate over time. But second, they're examples of faulty logic. We tend to see faulty logic whenever a powerful new technology suddenly matures. So it's really tempting for us humans to say, hey, this new technology is going to be pretty much like the old one, but maybe just a little bit different. So we saw this, for example, 100 years ago when the first combustion engines came out, and people assumed that they're going to be pretty much like a horse, maybe a little stronger, maybe a little faster, but essentially the same thing. And as time has shown us, that's exactly what did not happen. So the faulty logic that I see today is that people assume driverless vehicles are going to be pretty much just like today's human-driven cars, minus the driver. The reality is that driverless cars are going to set off a domino effect. They're going to set off a cascade of profound change that's going to change how we live, how cities operate, and how we move people and goods all over the world. So what I would like to do today is share with you my 3 probably optimistic predictions about the future of driverless vehicles. So first, driverless vehicles will incent people to buy more, not fewer cars. Driverless cars will cause the automotive industry to grow and become more diverse. And third, in doing so, driverless vehicles are going to spark innovation and create new industries, and with them, new jobs that we haven't even yet thought about today. So let's start with the first prediction. Private car ownership is going to increase. So today, all around the world, on average, people buy about 90 million cars and trucks a year. I predict that in 10 years, people are going to buy more than twice this number of cars and trucks. So how is such a huge increase possible? So part of it stems from the fact that driverless vehicles are going to be available in a much wider variety of different sizes and shapes. So when you take away these old design constraints that we've lived with for nearly 100 years, a lot more things become possible. So for example, driverless vehicles are going to be much better drivers than we humans are. We are terrible drivers. They're going to be smaller because they don't have to have all this safety shield. They're going to be lighter in weight. They're going to be greener, they're going to create less congestion in cities, and they're going to be powered by a simple electric battery. So when this happens, when a technology becomes small, cheap, convenient, and easy to use, its price goes way down. And in response, families are going to own not 1, not 2, but maybe 3 of their own driverless vehicles. And one reason is going to be just practical. You want to keep your stuff in your vehicle. The other is that driverless taxis, when there's no driver up front, it's going to be a mess in the back. And so if it's very cheap and easy to buy your own vehicle, it's going to be very tempting to just simply own one rather than rely on transportation as a service. So when this happens, and we start to see all kinds of different shapes and sizes of autonomous vehicles that cost less than vehicles do today and are easier to maintain, the automotive industry is going to respond. And today's OEMs are going to choose one of 2 possible paths forward. So the first path forward is going to make commodity unbranded vehicles. These are going to be low-margin vehicles that are going to be made by automotive OEMs, and sold to downstream tech companies or specialized transportation service providers that are going to then complete the vehicle. So I like to think of this as a Microsoft model, that the downstream company brands and controls a lot of the product branding and sales. So what's this market going to look like? Here's an example of the future of delivery trucks. You take away the human driver, and suddenly the delivery truck can become tiny. We're starting to see this already in China, where Chinese e-commerce JD.com is using these little delivery pods that can drive on sidewalks and that can bring people's e-commerce purchases straight to them. And it knows who you are simply by scanning your face and using deep learning software to recognize who you are, or you can scan your QR code on your phone. So this is going to be a big market for commodity, unbranded, driverless vehicles. This is another market, and I believe this is the future of mass transit in cities. Cities that aren't lucky enough to have an underground subway or metro, like Berlin and New York, have to rely on city buses. They're big, they block traffic, they're empty most of the time, and they're incredibly polluting. So this is a pilot in Milton Keynes, England, and this is what buses are going to look like in 10 to 20 years. So they're small, they're inexpensive, so cities can buy hundreds of them, and they solve the painful last mile problem, which makes a lot of people choose to not take public transportation. So what's the other path? The other path that some automotive OEMs are going to take is to create high-end, very fancy vehicles that I like to call land yachts. These are going to be sort of like the Apple model. They're going to be expensive. There's going to be one automotive company that's going to control and brand the entire production and marketing process. And these are going to be high margin, very beautiful, and special purpose-built vehicles. So for example, commuter vehicles, there's going to be a huge market and people needing really nice vehicles to get themselves around. And there's actually going to be some amazing images of land yachts in an hour. The speaker, Richard Seals, is going to show some pretty fabulous images. And then this is also another potential market. We take way too many short-haul flights these days. I myself would love to have one of these. It's an overnight vehicle where you take short trips and you sleep there. It's clean, it's private, it's your own, and you don't have to take an airplane to get there. And who wouldn't want to drive around town in one of these? So there's going to be all kinds of innovation and interesting new things coming out. So this leads me to my second prediction, that driverless vehicles are going to make the automobile industry grow and diversify. So for one, we're going to see a lot of big tech heavyweights coming into the automotive industry, and they're going to be equal partners in the design, marketing, branding, and creation. They're going to be as equal as the car companies. The good news is that revenue is going to increase all around. So this is a chart that shows over time, up to the year 2030, the different new subsections or segments of the automotive industry that are going to start to emerge as it becomes increasingly technological. So the good news is that profits and revenues for today's automotive companies are still robust. The new news is that simply automotive companies are going to be sharing the automotive industry with a whole host of other types of companies. So what are these new industries going to look like? Well, one is going to be, there's going to be a huge market in the sale, collection, brokering, management of data. So Intel predicts that on an average day, a typical driverless vehicle is going to generate 4,000 kilobytes, or 4,000 gigabytes of data a day. So from its cameras, its radar, its LiDAR, its different types of sensors. So this is an example of a driverless car in action. This is one owned by Waymo. This is how they see the world. And you can see it's driving around the city. Cameras and different types of sensors are scanning everything that it sees. This is a lot of data. And the companies that are able to control and sell and market this data are going to make a lot of money. There's clearly a lot of policy issues here as well around privacy and consumer rights and data ownership. So now I want to move to my third prediction, which is these new industries. So I already mentioned data is going to be a big and lucrative and thorny industry that's going to emerge with driverless vehicles. So who's going to be buying this data? Well, HD map companies are going to be buying this data. City governments are going to want to know exactly where is that fallen tree branch? Where are my potholes? Where do I need to spread my transportation budget? And even consumer companies are going to want to buy data from autonomous vehicles. And why is they want to know what's going on the street. So here's a handsome young man in downtown Berlin. Imagine a driverless vehicle has filmed the street scene, and it's noticed that, hey, leather jackets are really in style this year. So this is great data to sell to fast fashion companies, for example, that can then quickly make a whole bunch of leather jackets and get them into the store. And there's another use for data, which is simply to see the health of neighborhoods. So I apologize for the blurriness, but this is sort of a famous image from the United States. Is the city of Detroit, 2011, 2018. The economy collapsed in those years. The house on the left is well cared for. The house on the right is not. So driverless vehicles are actually going to be able to predict and anticipate economic decline in different neighborhoods by filming and analyzing the condition of the street. And there's actually even now artificial intelligence software that can rate or measure the socioeconomic status of a neighborhood by these visual cues. Another new industry is going to be, a data-driven industry, is going to be simply, you put a lot of different sensors in vehicles, and those sensors can tell us a lot. So here's an example. Imagine there's an autonomous school bus and you have an immune-compromised child. If I were a parent, I would want to get a text that says, hey, don't put your kid on the bus today because the flu level is very high. And this is just the beginning of these different types of industries. So that's just data. There's also going to be a lot of different industries and new jobs in retail. So today we have two types of commerce. We've got e-commerce and we have brick and mortar. So with driverless vehicles, we're going to have something I like to call roving commerce. So the idea is that the store comes to you. So grocery stores, organic food producers, they're going to send their wares out, and they're going to send their wares into food deserts, into places where their consumers live. The pub is going to come to you. You don't have to go to the pub. And if you're not feeling well, the doctors, the medical equipment, the tests can actually come to where you are rather than you having to go to the hospital. There are going to be new high-tech jobs. There's so much work to be done in analyzing the software, testing safety, building the software that is going to drive and steer these autonomous vehicles. There's also going to be a lot of more traditional engineering work and creating anti-vibration dampeners, noise control. So if you're going to buy yourself a really nice land yacht, you want it to be super, super quiet. And so as we do more things in our car, we're going to need new technologies to smooth out the ride, to bring down the noise. These are white-collar jobs. There are going to be a lot of jobs for people who are also willing to get their hands dirty, get their hands actually into the work. So as we have more autonomous vehicles in the world, not fewer, there's going to be a lot more jobs in simply maintaining and repairing and fixing those physical bodies of those vehicles, keeping them going. And as we've already mentioned, they're going to need to be cleaned. If you have autonomous buses, autonomous taxis, every 2 hours, there's going to have to be some sort of cleaning and maintenance crew that's going to fix that car up and get it ready for the next passengers. So with some last thoughts, there are a lot of predictions about autonomous vehicles, many of them pessimistic. I believe that driverless cars are going to do so much more than just enable us to take our hands off the steering wheel and do something else while we drive. They're going to create a tsunami of change. They're going to increase car sales. They're going to cause the automotive industry to grow and diversify. They're going to spark and create design innovation. And in doing so, create industries and new jobs that we haven't even yet thought about. So for the companies, the city governments, the people who can imagine and reimagine themselves in this new industry, the glass isn't going to be half full. It's not going to be half empty. It's going to be overflowing. Thank you.